Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. My name is Jessica, and this is time for just a general chat, I think. Hi, hello, how are you? How have you been? It's been a little while. I've been pretty crook with like everything that's been going on and hospital appointments. And I also poisoned myself. For those of you who don't know, I am celiac, and that means if I eat any gluten, I get very, very sick. And that happened actually just last week, just last Friday. So that happened. And then I've also been trying to work around getting my bathroom renovated and stuff like that, and there's been tradies and stuff, but it's coming along and it's awesome, and hopefully I'll have a bathroom in a couple of weeks. So the focus of today's video is A, to say that I'm still alive, and B, I got tagged in a booktube tag a couple of weeks ago, and this is my third time trying to film this. So however it comes out is just how it's going to be. So this booktube tag, I got tagged by Nicole from Noteworthy Fiction, and it was created by Book Bustle as a substitute for the booktube newbie tag. And so there's 10 questions, and the first one is, what for you makes a good book? And this is by far going to be the longest question, so strap yourself in, grab a coffee. Lots of things make up a really good book for me, and then if you put all of those into one book, then you've got an amazing book for me. And one of the major things for me is give me a decent villain that isn't watered down. If he or she is supposed to be a psychopath, then make them a psychopath. Make me uneasy. Or even if they end up being funny, that's okay as well. I mean, look at the Joker from Batman. He is one of the most famous villains out there, and he is completely unhinged. And that's what I'm talking about. A villain that makes the protagonist kind of make really hard choices that have consequences. I don't want any of that dumbed down, and that happens so much in writing, and it makes me really annoyed. The Vampire Lestat, he is an example of, to me, a great villain, because he's either a psychopath or a sociopath or one of those paths. And when he loses the plot, he loses the plot like massively. But he has so many funny one-liners and stuff like that. So Vampire Lestat is an example of a great villain for me. Another thing that makes a good book for me, a story that moves. So a story that just doesn't stagnate. Don't give me 3 chapters of backstory for it not to matter later on. If you're going to write a story, just keep it moving. It doesn't have to be fast-paced, but just not a glacial place. Just not a glacial place. Coffee. It doesn't have to be fast-paced, but not a glacial pace. The other thing that I really like is a book that uses a really good Chekhov's gun, and that's by introducing something at an earlier stage that is really important to the story later on, but you don't necessarily know that it's so important. really good example of that is what I finished recently was Yellowface. Had a very good Chekhov's gun. The Kitchen Boy by Robert Alexander is also uses some really good Chekhov's gun. The next thing that makes a really good book for me is a book that makes me cry. I can't help it. It means that you've actually got me invested in the story, and it means that you've moved me. Best example of that would be The Whale Rider, or the latest example. There's obviously The Raging Quiet as well, which always makes me cry. I was very, very, very close in Harry Potter 6. Very close. And that got a 5-star for me. I'm not sure where that is. That's around here somewhere. But, things like that where I get so invested in the characters. The other thing that I really enjoy is mixed media. So that is like excerpts of like a transcript. Where's a good example of that is Quiet New Bones. I have not completely finished this. But I mean, you've got little transcripts that are throughout the pages, or like text streams, X's and O's by Amy Lee, I believe is her name. There were lots of like scripts from the main character being on YouTube, and text. Sometimes mixed media can be the one thing that stops me from DNFing a book. The best example of that was the 50 Shades trilogy. The only reason it didn't get DNF'd was because of the texts and the emails. Icebreaker is another great example with the texting, the text threads. What else? There are some books that I really want to get my hands on, mixed media wise. That would be the Illuminae Files. Everyone in my family has killed someone, which I'm currently on hold at the library. I believe like there's a front page where it says on this page, this person is going to kill this person, and then this person is going to kill this person. And so that's like really different and really fun. You can't see it up there and I'm not getting it down, but House of Leaves, fantastic example of mixed media. I know that's a very contentious book that I haven't quite made my way through, but what I have read of it, I've enjoyed. And then I'm pretty sure there's some kind of murder mystery or thriller or something out there where the entire book is laid out as a podcast. And if you know what that is, please let me know. I believe Megan from Meg with Books has talked about it on her channel. Do you think I can find it again? No. But, that kind of mixed media thing. And the final thing that makes a really good book for me is a book that will make me ponder and make me think. Yellowface, it wasn't a perfect 5-star, it got a 4-star, but that made me ponder. Kitchen Boy, 5-star, definitely made me think and ponder, and this gave me so many surprises. It was probably the one book where I truly did not see the ending coming, and then it just kept twisting and twisting and twisting. That really made me think. Obviously, The Whale Rider, that made me think, just thinking about Koda's life and all the like traditions that came with the tribe, and trying to imagine yourself being in that position. I mean, obviously I can't, But that kind of thing. What's another book that really made me ponder? The Stand. The Stand, I have ended up giving a 3.75 just because of how long it is. But that made me stop and think how many parallels it had to COVID when COVID came out. The pièce de résistance, I'm not French, I probably butchered that, I'm sorry, was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. That book was top up there with a book that made me ponder. And yes, I guess the ending, but how they got there was really such an interesting journey, and it made me stop and it made me think and it made me theorize. And there were so many other different ways that you could take the book, and I just loved it for that. Question number 2. What are your current reads? My current reads are literally everything that I am in the middle of. So that is The Green Mile by Stephen King and Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I feel like there's more. I'm really good at reading half a book and then picking something up, which means at the end of the month, I'm always really busy finishing a lot of books. Hang on a second. False Hearts by Laura Lamb. And also, if I get time to finish it, Bright Cold Day by Victoria Ryder. So that's quite a bit for 6 days of reading. Question number 3. What was the last DNF and why? I'm going to preface this by saying I really hate DNFs. I like to give books a proper chance. And I think if I've got to a certain amount of the way through the book, then I'm like, surely I can just soldier on through and get the rest of it finished. But the last DNF that I did was The Ecocentrists by Keith Mercado Woodhouse. The why is because it was boring as batshit. It was 500 and something pages on Libby. And I got my way through like the preface and the introduction and part way through chapter 1, and I was just like, oh my god, this person was obviously an academic, and it was written in a very academic, structured format, and it just didn't translate well on the page, and it was just boring. It made me feel like I was reading a textbook, and not in a good way. You hear the expression, it's like slogging through mud. Well, I would rather have slogged through mud. I would rather have slogged through mud than have read that book. It was honestly that boring. I was originally started for the Earth Day mini challenge for Pokemon, and what was I reading that for? It was something about reading a non-fiction about the environment. But then I found that X's and O's, one of the X's that she was chasing, because you could read a fiction for it, one of the X's that she was chasing was very into the environment. They were talking about like climate change and what they're doing to help the environment and stuff like that. So I counted it for that. The one DNF before that, and it's my only other DNF this year, was Red, White, and Royal Blue. And again, I found it boring. I'm very sorry because I know that's a very beloved book, but I found it boring, and I thought the chapters were way too long for what they were. I got very close to 50% of the way through that. I was going to use it for Pokemon, but I've had to change that out. So, yeah, that's the only other DNF that I've done this year. I try not to DNF, It's probably something that I need to get better at though. Question number 4. What is an obscure book that you wish other people would read? And I'm going to go back to Piranesi, and I will preface this by saying that it is not a book for everyone. It is confusing when you first read it. It is a book written in diary format, but the dates are really weird. Piranesi writes the dates really weird. It's like the 12th day the albatross visited the 197th hall, or something like that, something along those lines. And I will say the language is very whimsical, and the whole world is very, very whimsical. So if you're not into that, you won't like this book. But if you are, it's something that I think people need to give a go. And for such a short book, people need to give it 100, 150 pages for things to start clicking in and sinking in, and theories to start building. Because once you understand what's going on, it's like, wow, it was such a revelation, and it was one that I really respected. And then once you do understand what's going on, there are so many different ways that you can interpret the book, and you can interpret what Susanna has been trying to say. You could read it from a psychological point of view, like with the psychological element. You could read it from the whole book being a metaphor. You can read it from a mental health point of view. You could read it for just an entertaining point of view. There's so many different avenues that you can take, and it's one of those stories where I think you can read it so many different times and get so many different things out of it. Like, I'm sure if I reread this, and I will reread it when I finally get my hands on it physically, I'm sure I'll get other things out of it that I perhaps missed on my first read through. Question number 5. What is the longest book you have ever read? And so far to date, that would be The Stand, which clocks in at 1150 pages, thereabouts. The longest after that I've attempted was The Witching Hour, and I think that was 1200 and something pages, and I still haven't finished that. I need to get back to it. I'm still about 300 pages in. And then I'd say the longest after that I have completed would be A Court of Silver Flames, and Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. That was 800 and I don't have it on me right now, but that was something like 860 pages. So I do own some pretty long books that I need to read. One of them being The Priory of the Orange Tree. I've got The Magician. I've got the Mage's Blood Quartet, which is from a Kiwi author. I've got Starless Sea, Discovery of Witches, that one Robert Galbraith book. I've also got House of Earth and Blood. So I've got quite a few long books lined up. Question number 6. If you were to have a dinner party and invite 5 fictional characters, who would they be? So first one for me would be Eric Northman, because he's Eric Northman. Keeping on the vampire train, the vampire Lestat, because, well, he's a psycho and he's also really funny. And if you've ever seen the movie, I think the 1980s, 84, I think is when it came out, the Interview with the Vampire with Tom Cruise. There's one point where Louis attacks Lestat and Lestat starts laughing, and to me he sounds like a girl, and that just sets me off every time. So yeah, I would have to try and make him laugh somehow if he were to come to my dinner party. Next one would be Charlie, and by extension Radar from Fairy Tale, mainly because of Radar. But I also love how caring Charlie is, at least right now, as in the moment that I'm in the book. And finally, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh God. So I would also invite Robert Langdon because I love symbolism and history, and I could listen to one of his lectures all day. I don't like the books, but never mind. And then I think my final guest would probably be Reese And, from the Court of Thorns and Roses series. Again, because of how loyal he is to his family. And I just think talking to him could be super interesting. Like, he's a High Lord, but he's actually approachable. So, yeah, I think those would be my 5. So there was Eric Northman, the Vampire Lestat, Charlie and Rhea, from Fairy Tale, Robert Langdon, and Reese. Question number 7 is 5 books you'd want if you were stranded on a desert island. And I went for kind of half a practical, half a entertainment choice for this. So first book I would want is a book that was good with plant identification. You'd want a practical book that would help you identify what plants are on the island if you could. And especially like if there were mushrooms or anything on the island, like there are some plants that are edible and some that are poisonous. And there are so many plants that are lookalikes that you could very easily pick something really bad. So if you had something that had at least some of those plants that you could identify, that would be great. And then maybe it could tell you how to prepare those plants as well. The next one that I chose was Mind Fuel by Bear Grylls. He's obviously done a lot of survival work and stuff like that. And this, I think, would be useful for teaching mental resilience, which is the purpose of the book. And I don't think you need anything else except yourself to do any of the exercises that are in the book. So yeah, there's those for like a practical point of view. And of course you'll need mental resilience to survive on a desert island. And then I also chose Outlander, which I read last month. What month was that? March. Because I think she too was displaced from her home and she had to learn how to survive using what was around her. And also for her, it was in a different time, but using only the materials that she had around her as a healer herself, and learning how to do all of those things in the 1700s. Next would be Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, and this book is about buried treasure, and I think it has a deserted island on it as well. It's been a very, very long time since I read this book. The one thing that I do remember, I think I read it in intermediate, the one thing I do remember is a black spot that appeared on the hand or the palm, and it was thought of as like a death omen or something like that, and it legit gave me nightmares when I was a kid. I really do want to read that book again, actually, quite soon. And the final, and I'm lumping this as an entire series, would be the Harry Potter series. And Yes, they are 7 books, but I have them in one box set. So, my video, my rules. Um, and these are books that I could read over and over again and still enjoy them. And, if things got a bit too much on a desert island, it's just a little bit of an escape into Hogwarts, into a different world, and that kind of thing. So those are my 5. Those are my 5 books. So one that would help with plant identification, Mind Fuel by Bear Grylls, Outlander, Treasure Island, and the Harry Potter series. Question number 8. What is one book that you couldn't put down? And that for me would be Harry Potter 6. This by far was my favourite book in the entire series. I haven't read number 7 yet. But especially coming off book 5, which I absolutely hated, book 6 was just so good. It had all of those things that I really enjoyed. I was invested in the story. It almost made me cry. The plot kept moving, which was really good. The villains were great. Had all those really cool things. And then we understood more about where Voldemort came from, learning more about his history and learning more about the history of Snape. But Snape's, like, where Snape is on the siding is still quite ambiguous. The mysterious Half-Blood Prince that happens to transform Harry's potion work into being masterpieces. Curses that actually bring an element of scariness and uneasiness to the books, because apart from that, it was quite PG, it was quite tame. Like, all of a sudden it's ramped up and there's actual consequences. And the best part about the book for me was Draco, and seeing him get such a good spotlight in the book and seeing him grow from this snooty little teenage boy who's like, oh, he's chosen me and it's great, and I'm going to do his bidding, and then starting to learn that there's consequences to those actions, and being in the situation, and seeing those cogs turn. Yeah, I loved it. It was a 5-star. Question number 9. What are 5 books or authors that you will never read? And this was a really hard one for me to answer, because I will pretty much give everything a go. But if I had to choose, I've never had the kind of the need or the yearning to read from the likes of, like, Lee Child or David Baldacci, or Leslie Pierce or Nora Roberts, that kind of thing. I've also never really been interested in crime, so I don't really see myself picking up those kind of books either. So no real books in that list, but, like, yeah, those are the kind of authors, genres that are just not high up on my priority list. I'm not going to say I'm never going to read them, but they're not high up there. Question number 10 is, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? And funny you should ask. I have already written a book. So my very first book that I wrote was Kieran. And Kieran is currently sitting in the editing room gathering dust, but it is technically complete. You all right there, Neo? So as a half angel, half demon, he's banished from both realms, So he has to try and build a life on Earth, living amongst humans. And then you see points where his demon side tries to take over, and then his angel side tries to take over. And so he's fighting that. But as he's hunted by these people from both sides, and in a way destroyed throughout the book. When murders in New York, so he lives in New York, when murders in New York start turning personal, he has to team up and use his powers before everything he loves and everyone he loves is ripped away before his very eyes. Themes from Kieran include found family, coming into one's own, not coming of age, because he's a 33-year-old man. I should hope he's grown up. Grief, love, passion, murder. So that's Kieran. The second book that I am currently working on follows a girl named Sakura. She's 17 years old. She loses her mother right in front of her, like she's holding her. That is not a spoiler because it needs to happen in order for the story to progress. But in order to protect her mother's soul, she needs to go on an adventure to the edge of this world and the next, and then that will help set her mother's soul free. But along the way, when she's caught by the group called the Collectors, they farm her mother's soul for energy. So soul is energy, and that's what's used to keep the world running, or keep some parts of the world running. Fast forward to Sakura actually getting to the edge of this world, and she's denied. The soul is unclaimed, the soul has been used, it's been farmed, denied. So now she has to take on these elemental challenges. She has to take on 5 challenges in order to cleanse her mother's soul and set her free. But, and I haven't decided this, but there's going to be a lot of reminiscing that's happening. So at the end of the day, will she have the courage to let her go? Major themes include grief, found family, spirituality, environmentalism, herbal medicine, coming of age, climate change. So yeah, there's a fair bit going on with that one. That is the end of the booktube profile tag. Thank you so much for watching. I am so sorry I have not been on lately, but I am here. You can always find me on streams. At the moment, I'm streaming weekly, if not twice a week. So you can always find me there. And let's tag some people. Who am I going to tag? I'm going to tag Kirsty from KBeth Bookish. Jonah from Words from the Void. And Nell from Nell Diamond. I will leave all of their channels linked below, so make sure you go ahead and check them out. Let's revisit question 8 and your question of the day. What is one book that you couldn't put down? Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.